Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about a really forceful, solid, and definitive opinion by Judge Robert McBurney in Georgia, rejecting the arguments of Trump election officials that they have extra discretion to question or otherwise impugn results of the voting in Georgia before they certify. So the bottom line here is in really strong terms, McBurney, who you may remember had a small role in this case way back in the grand jury selection phase, very strongly says the efforts to try to basically inject uncertainty and chaos into the process fail. Okay, let's set this up. One of the pro-Trump members of a county board sued for a declaratory judgment. She said, hey, we have these new pieces of guidance from the pro-Trump 3-2 election board, which in a partisan vote basically attempted to say you can raise reasonable cause as to the results and you can do things before you certify. So, said this Trump official, I need some guidance, court. I need a declaratory judgment telling me what I can and can't do. But she was hoping, of course, that what she could do would be that she would be able to basically raise doubts before the certification process. And that would be just music to the ears of Trump, who would then have the potential of kind of leaving things open, chaotic, uncertain, unsettled, and exploit that politically in order to keep Georgia in this case. But really, it's got a whole sort of nationwide impact, I think, from going forward. Okay, so McBurney first sets it up by basically taking a subtle swipe at the state board, which is now 3-2 Trump partisans and are trying to do all kinds of things. And he writes, the certainty of the electoral process that Georgia laws have long brought to Georgia voters has begun to unravel as key participants in the state's election management system have increasingly sought to impose their own rules and approaches that are either inconsistent with or flatly contrary to the letter of these laws, and this case involves one of those instances. So McBurney then goes through and says, look, there are things that you have that you can, there's a little play in the joints for that you can help exercise discretion for example, certain publications and advertisements about elections and the like. But certification is something you don't have any discretion over. Some things an election superintendent must do, and certification is one of those things. The law says after the close of the polls on the election, the superintendent, quote, shall publicly commence the computation and canvassing of the returns. So these efforts to try to make play in the joints and lead them to inject uncertainty, he forcefully rejects. He says, look, there's a mechanism if you think you have a reasonable doubt, like everyone else, after the certification is done and you have done your mandatory duty, you can raise objections or make points to the court, a reviewing court. That's where people need to go in order to challenge results, but not by suspending the certification process. So, and there's more. McBurney says, look, even if you have concerns about miscounts and you have to report those to a prosecutor, that's no cause to delay or decline certification. That's just not an option for what he calls this particular ministerial function. That means something you just got to do in the superintendent's broader portfolio of functions. And he goes through it. It's just straightforward, nothing profound about it under Georgia law. So he issues the declaratory judgment, and says, there are certain things you may have discretion to do, but not certification. That's something that you just have to do, and that's your duty as soon as you're able. And he ends with an interesting sort of story from the annals of Georgia election law, in which it had to do with Governor Talmadge, and basically the General Assembly trying to cast doubt through a contingent election, and the court made clear, the Supreme Court there, you cannot do this. You can't just try to make this contingent. Otherwise, everything would be up in the air. And McBurney puts out that story and says that hypothetical case that the Supreme Court in the Talmadge situation feared has now arrived. If election superintendents were, as plaintiff urges, free to play investigator, prosecutor, jury, and judge, and so, because of a unilateral determination of error or fraud, refused to certify election results, Georgia voters would be silenced. Our Constitution and our election code do not allow that to happen. So a very forceful opinion rejecting the efforts by the Trump handpicked Board of Elections to give individual counties the ability to gum up the works. Very important for Georgia, which is one of the swing states. Of course, there are similar efforts afoot throughout the country, different premises that the Republicans are bringing suit under and trying to have the ability to make things up in the air come November 5th. And that's the exact blueprint and game plan for Trump to be able then to exploit. But it looks like in Georgia, no dice and a very strong opinion rejecting it. So come the election, I don't see any option but for the officials to certify. Then if there are accusations of fraud or something to investigate, you do it in the normal way, not by a possibly pro-Trump election official, but by a neutral judge. That's the right procedure, and that ought to keep things methodical and keep Trump from making hay by stretching the law and giving individual partisans the ability to throw a wrench into the works. So a good, strong, and definitive statement out of Georgia, important in itself, but one of only many cases that are now pending in the courts that really could be important come November 5th and its potentially chaotic aftermath. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.